It's still very early in this process for the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. We had the tomos bestowed to Metropolitan Epiphanius on January 6th, and we had his enthronement on February 3rd. And supposedly the first synod will be convoked as early as today. So there's a lot going on, and I think I'll start with a few comments. Obviously, the main journey to autocephaly, to obtaining autocephaly from the Ecumenical Patriarchate, that process, that part of the process is complete. Back in December, when they had the Unification Council, one cannot avoid the fact that the representation of the Moscow Patriarchate was very limited. Only 2 of the bishops of the Moscow Patriarchate actually participated in the sobor, and we were expecting 18 of them to participate. So we can only speak of an incomplete process of unification, one that we think is probably going to continue for some time with many difficulties. Every day, a few more parishes go through the process of either joining the Orthodox Church of Ukraine or declaring their intent to join the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. People who are following the news see that the Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine is protesting and showing news that seems to suggest that some of these parish votes are orchestrated and are perhaps unfair. And so this is an ongoing issue that the Ukrainians are going to need to deal with. I want to take a couple of seconds to say a few things about the tomos itself. First of all, in terms of the content, the actual tomos is the basis for the statute of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And so a few things that we find in that tomos is, first of all, that the Orthodox Church of Ukraine is a Metropolia and is not a Patriarchate. So back in 1990, when the Ukrainian autocephalous Orthodox Church elevated its status from a Metropolitanate to a Patriarchate, we see now that in terms of canonical autocephaly that's recognized by the Ecumenical Patriarchate, that it has gone back to the status of a Metropolitanate. I think it is quite possible that in the future, especially if there is some sense of a complete unification of the churches, that the status could be elevated to that of a Patriarchate given the age of the church in Kyiv. So, from my perspective, what was more important was to receive recognized autocephaly and to have the name of the Metropolitan in the diptychs of the church. The greatest accomplishment here is that this is the beginning of the process for the Orthodox Church of Ukraine to finally be in communion with all of the other Orthodox churches. What I think some people who are tuning into this might not understand is that for the people of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, this is a time of euphoria. It's a time of joy. However you count the numbers, if we start with, for example, the re-emergence of the Ukrainian autocephalous Orthodox Church in Ukraine in 1989, 30 years later, you finally have the beginning of the process of recognition. This is something that the pioneers of autocephaly have been working for 100 years. And I think it can be very difficult for people who are outside of Ukraine, who are not familiar with the history, to understand why this is such a sense of great joy. The Ukrainians they haven't attempted to ask for autocephaly. They've had autocephaly. They've had independence. The Kyivan Patriarchate, the Ukrainian autocephalous Orthodox churches, these were independent church structures. And so what we have now with the Orthodox Church of Ukraine is an autocephaly that is recognized by the Ecumenical Patriarchate for the first time in the modern history of the Church of Ukraine. This is for Ukrainians who are in this church, this is a tremendous achievement. Now, I think that one of the things that's coming with this euphoria is that the tomos has become a holy relic for some people of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And there are two sides to this coin. On the one hand, again, for those who don't understand how much work, prayer, effort, and self-sacrifice has been put into this process, it's understandable why the tomos has become a holy relic. That's why the president has been taking it to various places in Ukraine on a kind of a tour. In this sense, it resembles kind of like another kind of a holy relic, like a miraculous icon, or a part of a body or a possession of a saint. This is how I think some Ukrainians are viewing it. You know, it's an acknowledgement of their legitimacy of their Orthodox Christianity. And so on the one side of the coin, it's understandable that this is a time of joy, a time of euphoria. On the other side of the coin, I think that the Orthodox Church of Ukraine is going to have to be careful with how they handle this period of time, especially with the role of the president. There's no denying that had not President Poroshenko assumed the role of leadership that he did, that the negotiations would have collapsed, that the sobor would not have happened, and that this chance for autocephaly recognized by the Ecumenical Patriarchate probably would have been lost, at least for a significant period of time. And so in that sense, whether one likes President Poroshenko or doesn't like him, history will witness to his efforts for following through and making sure that this process was completed. In the post-Soviet period, the relations between the Ukrainian state and the churches have been volatile. And I think that what we're seeing here is that there's a period of coziness, of comfort, of a convenient alliance between the state and the church, despite President Poroshenko's disavowal and denial of creating some kind of a state church. The Eastern churches have been prone to this in their history. I think Westerners just don't understand that in the East, there has been difficulty disentangling the connection between the state and the church because of the historical circumstances that these peoples and countries have found themselves in. So I think the Orthodox Church of Ukraine is one of the tasks that they're going to have to confront very soon, is to articulate and then to begin to act on what kind of a relationship that they want to have with the state, because things can change very quickly. An alliance of convenience can quickly become an inconvenience depending on how the elections go in March, and even if in March Poroshenko is reelected, that this is an issue that they're going to have to confront. The church has to actually be independent, not only independent of Moscow, but also independent of the government in Kyiv. And so this is something that I think that they're going to have to confront, and I think that their leaders know this very well. And so these are a couple of the challenges that they're going to have to confront. Now, one of the other questions that's been raised, and I've received this in private correspondence, is, well, part of the euphoria of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine is rooted in finally achieving liberation from Moscow and having recognition from the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Some people have raised the question, well, have they just exchanged one master for another? If Moscow is no longer the master of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, is Constantinople now the master of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine? I think it is undeniable, if you read the tomos of autocephaly, that the way that the Ecumenical Patriarchate, that the Church of Constantinople defines primacy for Orthodox Christianity, is visibly inscribed on that tomos. So two things come to mind that are examples. One is, and I think that this is a minor issue, at least for the time being, one is that the Orthodox Church of Ukraine has to receive its myrrh that it uses for the sacrament of chrismation that completes baptism and that also is used to receive converts into the church. It receives it from Constantinople. This is the Greek tradition that autocephalous churches that have been in the orbit of Constantinople receive their myrrh from Constantinople. Interesting historical trivia. In 1917 to 18, the Moscow Council, when it ratified the official canonical autonomy of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, Moscow authorized the Kyivan Metropolia to consecrate their own myrrh. And that was actually never put into practice for the Kyivan Metropolia, but it is part of their history. And so some people have referred to this as a sort of like a dependence on Constantinople, whereas others say, well, this just shows the unity of the churches. I think it's important to note that that's stipulated in the tomos, that the Ukrainian church is to receive its myrrh from Constantinople. I think of greater importance is the fact that if there is some kind of a dispute that cannot be resolved in the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, that the bishops have the right to appeal to the Patriarchate of Constantinople. And some people say that, well, this is definitely a way of Constantinople asserting the way that they understand primacy, is that if there's going to be an arbiter in all of world orthodoxy, that Constantinople is going to be the sole arbiter of disputed cases. Now, for example, the Ukrainian church has actually benefited from this because Patriarch Filaret had appealed 6 times his canonical deposition and anathematization to the Patriarch of Constantinople. And after all of these years, they annulled the canonical sanctions imposed by the Moscow Patriarchate on both Patriarch Filaret and Metropolitan Makary and restored them to the church. And it's important to note that there are many Orthodox who feel that Constantinople overstepped their bounds in taking this action. There are many who disagree with this particular move. So the Ukrainians benefited from this, but it's something that hypothetically they might have to deal with in the future. And then one other item that I think is crucial for Ukrainians who are outside of Ukraine is that the Tomos of autocephaly stipulates that the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, its jurisdictional boundary is limited to Ukraine. That means that the Orthodox Church of Ukraine cannot have monastic communities or parishes outside of Ukrainian borders. Without doubt, this is an issue that is going to have to be sorted out with parishes that belonged to the Kyivan Patriarchate and are now being subsumed into the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, because per the tomos and the statute that the Ukrainian bishops agreed to, they're going to have to now supposedly become part of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, meaning the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Canada or the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA. And those who are familiar with the history of these parishes of the Kyivan Patriarchate is that many of them had serious differences that actually resulted in lawsuits that ended up with their reception into the Kyivan Patriarchate. Supposedly, the Kyivan Patriarchate no longer exists. And these churches, canonically, are now part of the Ukrainian churches that are under the Ecumenical Patriarchate. This is an issue that's going to have to be worked out. And what I think that you see here is that Constantinople, what they're trying to do is they're trying to set the stage to have canonical order not only in Ukraine, but to have it everywhere. And so this is basically creating a slate so that there would be no foreign presence anywhere outside of the borders of that country. So these are some of the issues that are in the tomos. My sense is that for some period, it's going to take a long time for the Orthodox Church of Ukraine to adjust. It's not easy to have mutually independent church lives for 27, 28 years, and then suddenly move those lives together. Analogously, what we're talking about is when two families move into one house, and you don't have enough bedrooms for all the children. And so the children have to negotiate, well, who's going to share a bedroom? How are we going to work out this space that used to just be mine? This is a practical issue. It's going to take a long time to sort this out in the Orthodox Church of Ukraine.